Many may not be aware of this, which is the holding possession of gold was once illegal by the US government for all American citizens. Anyone who had gold could be fined or imprisoned for up to 10 years. Basically, gold was illegal. Although this was a major historical event, very little of this matter is discussed. Large-scale gold confiscation was carried out in 1933 by the US government. This was an important event that occurred during the Great Depression and left a lasting impact on the US economy. This event was one of the most significant government interventions in the US economy in the 20th century. I will focus on the US government's gold seizure in this video. This is the result of the 1929 Great Depression. Please comment if you want me to make a video explaining the worst economic crisis. What happened? This event occurred in the early 1930s, and the United States faced its worst economic crisis. The Great Depression first, with the highest unemployment rate in modern US history. Secondly, there was a banking sector failure. As a result, the people lost confidence in the banking system and began hoarding gold by selling dollars. This made the economic situation worse. Inflation rose sharply due to the fall in the dollar. GDP also continued to decline due to sluggishness in economic activity. Unemployment rate. The unemployment rate during the Great Depression in the United States was very high. At the peak of the Great Depression in 1933, the unemployment rate in the U.S. reached 25% of the workforce. This means that around 1 in 4 workers were unemployed then. Unemployment rose sharply from less than 3% in 1929 before the Great Depression began. High unemployment persisted throughout the 1930s, although it gradually declined. Still, 15% were unemployed in 1940. The most affected group was unskilled workers and laborers, with unemployment exceeding 35%. Banks' failure. Further exacerbating the situation was the U.S. banking system's failure. Some examples of banks that failed and went bankrupt during the Great Depression in the United States are Bank of the United States. It was one of the largest commercial banks in the U.S. at that time. It failed in December 1930, affecting 400,000 depositors. Continental Illinois National Bank. This Chicago bank was forced to close in May 1932 and did not reopen. First National Bank, the central bank in Detroit that went bankrupt in 1933. Its failure sparked significant riots. Farmers Bank of Cameron, Missouri, one of over 1,700 small banks that failed in the 1930s. Empire Trust Company. This major New York trust company went bankrupt in 1931 with over $200 million in losses. The Guardian National Bank of Commerce. This Los Angeles bank was permanently closed in March 1933. Between 1929 and 1933, more than 9,000 banks in the U.S. failed. This led to losing deposits and public confidence in the banking system. FD. Because the American economy was getting worse, the new U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed an executive order in April 1933. FDR had just become president a month after former President Hoover, who was said to have failed to deal with the American economic crisis, lost. Confiscation Act. Among the contents of the 1933 Gold Seizure Act enacted by FDR-RE, 1. Prohibiting gold ownership by American citizens. This act prohibits American citizens from owning and storing gold coins and gold bars exceeding the prescribed limit. 2. Requiring the surrender of gold to the government. The act requires all citizens to surrender their gold possessions to the Federal Reserve and exchange them for paper money. 3. Limiting personal gold ownership. Citizens can only own up to $100 worth of gold per individual for personal use, such as jewelry. 4. Officially raising the price of gold. This act sets the increase in the price of gold from $20 per ounce to $35, depreciating the value of the US dollar. 5. Empowering the government to seize gold. It empowers the government to seize any gold still owned by citizens after the surrender period. 6. Imposing harsh penalties. Severe penalties, including fines of up to $10,000 or imprisonment for up to 10 years, were imposed on anyone who refused to comply. 7. Strengthening government gold reserves. This act strengthened the U.S. government's gold reserves with hundreds of millions of ounces of seized gold. 8. Gold surrendered to the government will be paid $25 per ounce, which is lower than the global market price. For example, the gold price in London is around $34 per ounce. Why were these measures taken? The main reason this action was taken was to increase government gold reserves. because at that time, the financial monetary system still relied on gold. So to increase use issuance, the government needed to increase gold reserves first. At this time, the U.S. financial system stipulated that for every one used, it had to be backed by 40 cents worth of gold. The government can first implement an economic stimulus plan by increasing dollar issuance. Secondly, it can carry out fiscal policies and manage government spending. This measure was also taken because government tax revenues had declined significantly due to the prolonged economic downturn that had lasted almost 4 years. In addition to gold confiscation, the government also increased tax rates much higher. Corporate taxes for wealthy individuals rose by more than 90%. Reaction: what was the American public's reception to this 1933 gold seizure order? There must have been various reactions from the community, some positive and some negative. It can be said that most people accepted and supported this action. This is a form of patriotic support, where the people considered this a necessary step for the U.S. to get out of economic stagnation. These groups complied with this order and surrendered their gold. There was also some anger and condemnation from a small minority of people who opposed this movie. This group was angry at the order, which they saw as an attack on private property rights and individual freedom. There were also some lawsuits against the government by citizens challenging the order in court as unconstitutional. But the Supreme Court rejected these lawsuits, upholding the government's power. Value: the estimated 300 million troy ounces of gold seized by the U.S. government in 1933 was worth around a $6.08 billion in 1933 dollars. 300 million ounces is equal to 9.3 million kg worth of seizures. At current prices, the value of this seizure is close to 550 billion USD. And the 1933 Gold Confiscation Act in the United States was repealed in 1974 when President Gerald Ford signed an order again allowing individual ownership of gold. This officially ended Executive Order 6102, which banned private gold ownership since 1933. American citizens are now again allowed to own gold coins, bars, and certificates for the first time in over 40 years. The government can still confiscate individuals' gold in national emergencies or war. Gold price controls were also abolished, allowing market pricing. The 1934 Gold Reserve Act, which made private gold illegal, was not formally repealed but became inactive. This termination occurred after 4 years. The U.S. ended the Bretton Woods system in 1971 under President Richard Nixon. After this, the world completely abandoned the gold-backed monetary policy system. So after more than 4 decades, the ban on private gold ownership that began in 1933 finally ended in 1974 under President Ford. Conclusion: here are some key conclusions that can be drawn from the 1933 gold confiscation event in the United States. It demonstrated the federal government's enormous power to intervene in markets and private property during national crises. This set a precedent for future actions. Finally, I believe neither fiat-based nor gold-backed currency systems are 100% perfect, as happened because the government did not have the power to print money as it did not have enough gold in the gold-backed currency system. Various extraordinary measures were taken, including confiscating gold from the people.